That international flavour really adds to it, because just from talking to people, there's so much commonality in the issues that they deal with, from training, equipment and the challenges they have out in the real world. And there's also a lot of commonality, I suppose, in the societal sort of way that emergency services are regarded. We're lucky, for instance, in this country, we have a national ambulance service, we have a national police force, and we have local authorities then looking after the fire services. Whereas some of the other countries, towns, cities, municipalities, they may have multiple health service executives that would then govern their ambulance services, and similarly, such as the United Kingdom, would have dozens of police forces. So you can just think of the challenges there as well when it comes to training together, cooperation and even communication.
So it is possible to teach empathy, and it is possible to teach emotional intelligence, and you know, we're moving into that space now in terms of this year's EMS Gathering. This morning we had at the Everyman Theatre we dealt with that compassion with competence. One chance to do it right was the title of the session, and in that we simulated a cardiac arrest of a young man in his 40s, and the paramedic breaking the news to his wife. And this afternoon we have a workshop that deals with just that, and we've got expertise in to facilitate that workshop, people who have done masters and PhDs in the area and who are across the global literature that's out there, that sort of informs the best practice when it comes to that type of activity, which is a fundamental part of what it is to be a frontline provider.
Okay, so we've talked about the analgesia, drug administration, we've talked about hemorrhage control. Let's think about how we actually release it from the machine. So it's a pump, it's an impeller, it looks a bit like a fan, but it moves water instead of air, and it's dragged the limb in and partially amputated some digits we would expect. So how did we decide to get it out from that mechanism?
Reversing.
Yeah, by cranking the fan backwards. What's the other option? What's the alternative option?
And one of the big things here in Ireland, right, is because of the way that climate change has made a difference to water and flooding. You now have a bigger approach where we're dealing with water on a lot more bases. But also one of our biggest stats for water rescue, and we do a lot of live rescue, right? And there's a big difference is that one of our stations here is stationed within less than a minute from the main part of the water, okay? And then they decide...
People can feed these ideas and this new knowledge and things back into their own organisations with a view to improving not only the circumstances and conditions that the staff are working in, but also the, I suppose, ultimately the patient outcomes and things like that. Particularly for interagency cooperation, where you might have the Gardaí, you might have the local authority, HSE. You could also have perhaps such an example perhaps would be like Storm Ophelia, Storm Emma, where you'd have a heavy involvement as well from voluntaries such as St. John's Ambulance, Civil Defence, Red Cross, Coast Guard, etc. So it's very important for them to have an involvement as well and an understanding of it. They can learn as well, and everybody can feed back into it.
Again, it's just a huge thanks to everybody who's involved. As you can see, there are a lot of agencies here. I know there's a sea of yellow here with ambulance vehicles at the moment, but it wouldn't be really an ambulance-led EMS gathering if we didn't have that. But we have the explosive ordnance unit from Collins's Barracks, we have the customs, we have members of An Garda Síochána, we have the Coast Guard. You saw earlier we had rescue helicopter 117 that travelled up from Waterford especially to give a bit of a display here. Yeah, so I mean, we always welcome new ideas. We may not always be able to adopt them. Sometimes I suppose we're even jealous of them. One of the big events here for us, or one of the big buzz for us here, is that we had some people from the HEART team. So here in Cork we're starting to set up our version of HEART. It's the emergency response team. We're going to start off with some decontamination. So we're swapping ideas. We're showing them our kit. They're showing us theirs. They're telling us, you know, what they've learned. So I suppose we're in our infancy, to be fair, and the information we can get from them is just, it's brilliant. It's brilliant. It helps us along the way. Okay, so we've a bit of a surprise lined up tonight. The delegates are going to come to a social event in a nightclub here in the Victorian Quarter in Cork City. What's going to happen is we're going to have a surprise incident. People are going to be socialising, hopefully doing a bit of dancing, and out of the blue there may be a little bang here, a bit of a flash here.
Guys, settle down. Whoa. So very basically, in a nutshell, the Hazardous Area Response Team, or HEART, is basically a team of paramedics that receive some extra training and skills to have the ability to work within the hot zone and the warm zone of different types of significant incidents and major incidents. Things like CBRN, hazmat, heights, confined space. I do see potential benefits for the National Ambulance Service to take on a role similar to the Hazardous Area Response Team. Certainly some of the training, I mean, it can't hurt extra training. I do think that, you know, there might be challenges in Ireland that aren't necessarily present in the UK, things like the population, the workload, the roads network, things like that. In terms of visiting the EMS Gathering here, I think that it's important for paramedics to come outside the UK and paramedics within Ireland to see what happens outside the country. There's lots of exciting research in other countries that will inevitably impact your own clinical practice in the country you're in at some stage. I think it's important to see what other people are doing, because they may be ahead of the trend in one aspect, and then you may be able to show them that you're ahead of the trend in another aspect, and that we can all learn. And it's about shared learning and shared awareness of where we're going as a profession globally.
Whoa, okay, help us arrive. Let's fucking do it! Let's take this out!
Well, one of the key learning outcomes for an event like this is really the sharing of information, that people will leave the emergency medical services gathering here in Cork with a greater sense of community, I suppose, knowing that the challenges that you might be facing here, they're equally the same challenges perhaps in another part of the world, but also there'll be solutions, suggestions, ideas and things, so that progress can be made.
For me, the civil defence was a great stepping stone into the frontline emergency services. First off, it gave me an insight into the service, because we met people that were already volunteers with civil defence that were in the frontline services, but also through exercises and you know, emergency call-outs, we'd get to see a little bit of the job. I think that's important, that there's some interoperability between the voluntary sector and the frontline sector, because inevitably a lot of people come through the voluntary sector to the frontline sector, and those frontline paramedics can give back to the voluntary sector as well. I think it's you know, people talk about a vicious circle. I think that's a good circle, the voluntary into the frontline sector.
Very good. Is there anything you want to add or finish off with?
emergencytimes.co.uk.ie.eu.com.
Follow us on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram at Emergency Times.